Okay, so now instead of doing a visual model, we are going to use a different method called least common multiple. That's because sometimes when you're using a visual model, if we have big denominators like 10 or like 6, it can be a little bit tricky and take a little bit more time. So we're going to instead use LCM, which is our least common multiple. So we notice that these denominators are different. 10 and 6 are not the same. So what we're going to do is we are going to list out all of the multiples of both denominators. So I'm going to start with my first fraction, my 3/10. The denominator is 10. So I'm going to list out the multiples of 10, which is like kind of the same as skip counting. So if we skip count by 10, we can go 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, and so on. We can list out as many as we can think of quickly. We'll come back to how we know when to stop later. So we have our first one, our 10, and now we go to our second one is our 6. When we skip count by 6, 6, 12, 18, 24, 30, 36, 42, 48, and so on. So when we look at these lists, we are trying to find the least common multiple. That means we want to see all of the multiples we have in common. So we're going to circle every one we have in common. And the only one I see here is this 30. Since this 30 is the only one I see, it means it's also going to be the lowest one, the least one. So that's the one that we're going to pick. That means that 30 is going to be our new denominator. So I can put, I'm going to bring back down my two fractions, my 3/10 plus my 5/6. But now I know that my new denominator is going to be 30 for both of them. So I'm going to go ahead and write that here. I have to see, how did I make 10 into 30? How did I go from 10 to 30? I can either remember, I know 10 times 3 is 30, so it's going to be a times 3. But if I don't remember that, I can look at my list up here and see that and count each multiple, right? So this would be 10 times 1 for this one would be 10 times 2, and this one would be 10 times 3. So I could either look at my list and count 1, 2, 3, or I can just remember that 10 times 3 is 30. Either way, whatever we have to do to the bottom, we have to do to the top. So on the bottom, we did 10 times 3 to get 30. That means on the top, we also have to do times 3. Our numerator is 3, so we have to do 3 times 3, which is 9. Means our new fraction over here is 9 over 30. And now for our second one, we have to do the same thing. We're not at 10, though. We're at our 6. So if we look at our 6, we have to see how did 6 get to 30. We can either count our multiples, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or we can remember that 6 times 5 is equal to 30. So on the bottom, we did 6 times 5. That means on the top, we have to times 5 as well. And 5 times 5, we know is 25. That means our other new fraction is 25 over 30. So to finish this problem out, we just rewrite them. We have our 9 over 30 plus our 25 over 30. Now that they have the same denominator, we can just add on the top 25 plus 9, 34. And then we know we do not add our common denominators. So it would be 34 over 30. We are so smart, though, and we know that this is an improper fraction, which we do not want. So I have to see how many times does 30 go into 34. Those are super close. 30 is super big, and we know that 30 times 2 is 60. So it's only going to go in one time. And we keep our denominator the same. And then if 30 goes into 34 one time, how many are left over? We know that there are 4 left over. So this would be 1 and 4 over 30, but we know that this could be simplified even more because we know when we see two even numbers that they could always be simplified by 2. So if I divide by 2 on the top and divide by 2 on the bottom, keep our whole number the same. 4 divided by 2 is 2, and 30 divided by 2 is 15. So our final, most simple answer is 1 and 2/15. Okay, so we're going to do one more example with the LCM method. This time we have 2/3 and 1/6. Again, I know that my denominators are different. I'm going to go ahead and list out my multiples. So for my multiples of 3, we can skip count again. 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, 24, 27, 30 is how far I'll go. And now for our 6, we can go ahead and do 6, 12, 18, 24, 30, 36, and we'll stop there. The reason I'm stopping there is because I already see some multiples that we have in common with 3 and 6. First of all, we have 6 in common, we have 12 in common, we have 18 in common, 24 in common. It's every single one we have in common. Sorry, these are getting messy. But if we look, every factor or every multiple of 6 is common with 3. So this is where the L in LCM is important. We are looking for the least common multiple. That means the lowest number. So of all of these, 6, 12, 18, 24, 30, 36, 6 is going to be the lowest one. So we are going to choose 6. So again, I'm going to go ahead and bring my fractions down. I started with 2/3. So I have 2/3, and then I also had 1/6. So I have my 2/3 and my 1/6. But now I know that my new denominator is going to be 6. So I have to turn this 2/3 into a number with the denominator of 6. So I have to think, how did my 3 become a 6? If we can look, we have 1, 2. That means 3 times 2 is equal to 6, or hopefully you can remember that 3 times 2 is equal to 6 as well. So what we do on the bottom has to happen on the top. So 2 times 2 is 4. So that means our new fraction over here is 4/6. But now if we look over here, we already have a denominator of 6. That means we don't have to do anything. It didn't change. Technically, you can say that this is times 1. So we could technically do times 1 on the top and times 1 on the bottom, which would just give us our same fraction of 1/6. So if you get a denominator that you already have as your common denominator, 6 is already the denominator, you don't have to do anything. You can just keep it the same. But now we can go ahead and finish solving. We have our 4/6 plus our 1/6, which would be, we have to add on the top. 4 plus 1 is 5. And then our denominator stays the same, 5/6. So it is important to know that when you are listing out your your multiples, if you go ahead and list the first one, when you're listing the second one, you can go ahead and stop as soon as you see the first one in common. So really, when I listed out 3, 6, 9, 12, when I started writing 6, I could have stopped as soon as I saw the 6, as soon as I saw that they have 6 in common.